guess we have to.
I guess we're going to have to.
Okay, good. So, welcome everyone. Are we ready to go? Question to IGF, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So welcome to the IGF 2020 session 352, Digital Human Rights, Digital Integrity of the Human Person. So this workshop will introduce this new legal concept, the possible implication for data protection, and how the concept could be introduced into the current legal framework. The right to digital integrity is to be understood as the general justification for all human digital rights, including the right to data protection. Every human evolves today in a multidimensional physical and digital environment. If each individual is to keep their individuality and autonomy in their daily choices, they must be protected and given effective tools to defend their own autonomy. Recognizing that the human life have been digitally extended means questioning ourselves on what makes us human today. Should personal data be considered as component of the person rather than objects that can be owned by whoever collects the data? Should our digital integrity be protected? And if each human person already has the right to physical and mental integrity stated for example, in the Swiss Constitution or the Charter of Fundamental Rights in the European Union, should they also have the right to digital integrity? So we have some panelists here today that go deep into this question. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Gregory Engels. I'm with Pirate Parties International. It's an NGO that is have a consultative status with the UN ECOSOC, and I'm glad to be able to host this session today. So, so the question, there's a ask from the auditorium that everybody who's not speaking please mute themselves, and I would give the microphone over to Alexis, who will start with his presentation. And after we've done the initial round of presentation, we promote everybody to panelists so we can have a group discussion. Thank you very much. Alexis?
Yes, hello. First, I'm presenting myself. I'm Alexis Roussel. I used to work for the UN a long time ago. I was a e-government specialist for the International Court of Justice and then for UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And then I left the UN and then went to the private sector. I'm very active in the cryptocurrency and the cryptocurrency and blockchain space in Switzerland. But I'm also, since I left the UN, advocate of data protection within mostly Switzerland. And I've been working a lot on digital rights within Switzerland. What I'm going to present to you is the summary of this work and how we are pushing digital rights within the Swiss framework and then also externally within the European Union. So I'm going to share my screen with my presentation with you. So please bear in mind while I do this. And normally if I go like this, you will see everything. Yeah, okay. And Gregory, I can still see you, so that should be fine. Okay. So like Gregory said, I'm going to present you the concept of the digital integrity to the human person. And we see this as a sorry, one second. We see this as a fundamental new right that that is going to be, I hope, this is my hope, of course, is going to be integrated into most of the legal frameworks that we see, which are adapted to this vision, because of course it pushes a specific vision, and we're going to see that there are different types of vision about the digital representation of the human person. So to give a context, we are really here in in a concept, in a generational gap. And there was a very key moment that happened in a trial. It's just to give you a taste of what is this generational gap, where when Peter Sunder is a person that was managing the Pirate Bay, and the Pirate Bay was one of those big websites where you can share torrents, you can share music and movies, and it was seen as a copyright infringement. And actually, a lot of people in the newer generation were seeing this as a new way to exchange culture. And so there was a big clash between creating a new type of culture and respecting the copyrights. And we saw this during the trial when the judge said to Peter Sunder that he was meeting the other people in IRL, in real life. And Peter Sunder said, no, we are not using this expression in real life. We are using the expression away from keyboard, AFK, because for us, the internet is real. So there was this big clash between, during this conversation between the judge and the Peter Sunder. Obviously, the judge was representing the old system and the old rules and was applying those old rules, but the clash was still there. Another big clash which is happening right now is a lot of people, and especially at very high level, governments and companies are using this expression that personal data is the new oil. So why are they using this? Because they're trying to make sense, of course, of what is personal data, and they see that when the business models around personal data allows a lot of creation of value. So once you make this constatation, once you make this remark, a lot of countries are trying to mimic what is happening in the Silicon Valley and say, okay, we also want to have a striving business which is building around computer science in our country. And so we need some guidelines to build that industry and to have the key elements in place for our industry to grow. And they are basing this on the fact that they believe personal data is like oil, is the new oil of the 21st century. And that has a wrong feeling, a wrong taste for a lot of people, because basically people say, yeah, but we are not oil. So this is also pushing a lot of regulation right now, are being pushed by this meaning. So what we can see first, there is in the world, there is 3 main approaches, and we're going to talk a bit further of all the approaches later in the discussion panel. We can start to see that there are different approaches on personal data. And I'm going to link it with regions, but this is not very clear yet. Some regions are mixed. It's not just about region, but we could say, for example, that the first one is more like European and African. The second one is more American, and the last one is more Asian. But so the first approach is that personal data are linked to inalienable rights, and they're linked to the human person. So that would be like the European or African approach. Then there is a second approach, which is that personal data are available to the market. It's a free market, and this is the US. This is what is driving Silicon Valley and what we call the GAFA. And they are actually using data as a commodity. So they can take it, they can acquire it, they can create it, enhance it, and they can sell it, or they can feed it back to the person to actually manipulate the person for their own good, for selling more products. So it's a very libertarian view, which is completely free, and it's up to the responsibility to the individual to not give data if they don't want to. And then there's a third vision, which is what we could say is a more Asian in general, but we see it also partially in Europe, is that personal data are part of the common good, meaning that the personal data that everyone is producing is actually a set of data which is shared by everyone. And so it is up for the state or institutions or any kind of institution to actually take care of these data and manage these data for the common good, for the greater happiness of the whole society. And we can see this in China and Russia somehow also. And so we see those three different approaches, and it is important to understand that these approaches are going will be the new lines of frictions, or are becoming we see already in the world that these lines of frictions appearing in the international multilateral system. We will see those groups and countries maybe moving from one group to another. So here I'm going to propose a vision more about the first one, about how in humanist democracy or humanist regimes we can actually we link it to the individual. So there is currently, and since 20 years, there's a search for a core digital human right, and this search is very hard, and there is a vision of saying that this core digital right has to be understood by all, and it has to be enforceable also by all. And until now, the best answer we had was the right to digital self-determination, or the right to digital self-autonomy. And these are like terms which are not very understandable, and also don't relate to things which exist already in the existing digital legal framework. So these rights about digital self-determination exists in Germany, exists also in Switzerland. There has been some law cases which are representing them, but still it's very hard to express them. And there are many reasons for this, but we'll come to some of them. So I want to give also an historical perspective in the world, in Europe. The human rights mostly have been shaped through a history which starts with the printing press innovation. So we have this long history between the printing press revolution innovation until the Lumière, the lights, what we call the Enlightenment in the 18th century, and then the Industrial Revolution, where the fact that there is a technological innovation which allows the information to be shared differently in the society, allows more people to have access to information, and then the rights of the people are transformed by this innovation. And the old regime, which was based on a royal system with the oral tradition, a lot of oral tradition, and hierarchical, another type of hierarchical institution, that changed into a new form that we see in Europe as being democracies or republics. And in the same way, the fact that there is an internet innovation which changes how the information is produced and shared in the society is shaping a new world, shaping a different world, where there are questions about the rights of the individuals and the way these rights are going to shape in the future will then shape the new institutions that we will have in the future, because our institution will evolve. So when using this comparison between those two big movements that happen in the history, we can also use this as a way to understand how those rights were integrated in our legal system. And one of the rights that showed up, and which is one of the most fundamental, is the right to life. The right to life is a right which is appearing in most constitution, most declaration of human rights. I mean, all of them, basically. Normally, it appears in almost all constitutions. Why? Because this is the first step for a state or an institution to recognize the person on which you have jurisdiction. And once you give the right to life, usually the right to life is necessary to allow the person to be autonomous and to allow this person to be free in its decision process. So we saw that in some cases, even if it's written in the Constitution, written in a chart of rights, it doesn't mean that it's enough for people to understand it. And to say that there is a right to life means maybe we can remove the death penalty. That's already a good step, but it doesn't mean that that we guarantee the full autonomy of the person. So we usually see some more specific rights appearing just to give a shape on this, how this autonomy is going to be preserved. And the most what we see most is that we see the right of life combined with the right to have physical and mental integrity preserved. So we see this in the Swiss Constitution, we see this in the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. And what it means that if the state is not respecting the physical integrity of the individual, then it doesn't allow the person to be autonomous. I'm going to give you a very blunt example, is that if I'm entering a voting, if I'm going to an election and I'm entering the voting room and I'm being beat up by an official, I will not vote the same way if I'm not beaten up. So that's an aggression against my physical integrity. But the same way, mental integrity, if I'm being submitted to some kind of propaganda which is subliminal, for example, so I don't even see the images that I'm being shown, which change my mental state, I can vote differently. And now the same way, and we saw this with Cambridge Analytica in the US and in Europe, you can actually manipulate the digital element, the digital space of the person. And by manipulating this, you can actually change the vote of the person. You can change the way that this person is choosing their own actions. So you are infringing on his autonomy. So we have to recognize this and to say, well, yes, indeed, our life have been digitally extended. So our right to life also should be extended, and which means that next to my physical and mental integrity, I also have a right to digital integrity. And so by respecting this digital, the whole integrity and also digital, this is how we can keep the individual autonomous and free. So this is really where the example of Cambridge Analytica comes in. Some people would say, yes, but the fact that this data was available on on Facebook is considered sometimes as a public forum. It was not an infringement on privacy, and it was not always seen as this, but it's actually still an infringement on your personal integrity, which actually created a distortion in your own autonomy. So what are the consequences of taking such important step? The first consequences is that we can actually define what are what is personal data. And until recently, or even still today, there is a very little definition of what personal data is, in the sense of how do you categorize them. So some will say it's a commodity, and that we saw that's on the market side. And in the US, the Silicon Valley dogma would say this. It's a pure commodity. We can just make what we want with it and sell it. In Europe, or in Europe and Africa mostly, so the data protection of institutions, which are together, and especially the French-speaking data protection agencies, authorities, which are together in an association called AFA-PDP, have made a declaration in 2018 saying that personal data are elements of the human person. Actually, that means that they are exactly treated the same way as body parts. And because they are part of the person, they have inalienable rights that are attached to them, and they cannot be sold. That's the critical thing, is that as soon as you consider that data is part of yourself, then the data cannot be sold. It can be transferred into a certain condition. There can be, of course, exchanges of data, but the relationship you have is based on your data, then is based on informed consent. And that's the critical thing. We cannot just take data because it's available and it's a commodity, or because it's part of the common good and we can just take it. No, there has to be an informed consent for the person to actually provide this data. So we can argue, for example, that harvesting data by nature is something which is infringing is harming the digital integrity of the person. And someone that has a third party who is owning data on us is not something which should be acceptable. The one other consequence of this is that there is a dogma in Europe and in most of the places where they consider that data as a commodity, or if you want to have a responsible approach, where they say, well, if you want to protect yourself, you can. You just have to claim. You are the one who is supposed to defend yourself and know where your data is. And that's a very bad assumption, because it assumes that you know exactly where all your data is. And it's you can hear it in discussion when people are saying, oh, but if you don't want to have problems about privacy and rights, don't publish on Facebook. Yeah, that's a very common thing. But it's not because I'm not publishing on Facebook that actually Facebook doesn't have data on me. That's two different things, you know. And people have no conscience of how much data is actually harvested and stored everywhere. So the rights that we have on our data should take into consideration that it's impossible for someone to know where the data is. So we need to have a blanket protection, and not a protection which can only apply when we discover where the data is and then we attack the specific company or the specific institution. So no law should assume that we know where our data is. And actually, in reality, no law assumes that we understand where are our body parts. We are protected even if someone is in a coma and has no mental mental capacity to understand where its body is. The body of the person is still protected by law, and you're not allowed to chop him off in the hospital, for example. I'm taking a very blunt example, but it allows to understand sometimes. So some people will say, okay, yes, how does it go with GDPR? Because GDPR already is a standard in the world right now, and would it go with it? Basically, I would say that most of it would go with it. You know, the right to digital integrity is a fundamental human rights. It's very at high level within the right of life. GDPR is a law which applies in detail how data can be treated and what is allowed, what is not allowed. So that's the case. In many ways, we have a fundamental right, and then we have specific laws that applies that. So one of the things which allows this digital right allows us to do is to start to go out of the simple fact of trying to protect the right to privacy. And it's not just the right to privacy actually that we're protecting, is the right of the life and its digital part, the digital life of the human person. So the GDPR is not incompatible. There is one part which is rather incompatible. It's the material scope of the GDPR, and its GDPR has a very broad exclusion article for the states, not for the private companies, but for the states. And basically, as soon as a state, as an institution can claim that there is a security reason behind, even for just prospective manner, just talking about security is enough to exclude the application of GDPR. So that would be an infringement against the digital right for digital integrity, because a law or any regulation cannot, if it makes an infringement on a right, it has to be much more precise than just a blanket exclusion like it is done here. So why do we need it? I think there is a few elements that we can that we can say. Basically, if we need the right to digital integrity, this applies into the relationship between a state, who has added this in its own constitution, and its citizens. So it forces basically the state to have a discussion, have an interaction with its own citizen, where they're not harming their digital self. For example, they have to be careful in how they manage databases. They shouldn't allow things like Cambridge Analytica to promote things. They shouldn't, like the French, for example, are doing right now. The French government is allowing the tax department to go on social networks to analyze the data of the person to see if tax-wise they are doing good or not. I think that these are the kind of things which are infringing on the digital integrity. In Switzerland, we have a lot of examples where we have laws which are touching on digital rights, but the debate is not being held. We had small censorship tools like domain name censorship for related to online gaming, online money gaming that was set in place. And while we can assume that we can say, yes, it's reasonable to protect the industry and to block external companies from external countries to compete with regulated casino business, that's maybe a reason. The debate didn't touch upon the fact that it might be an infringement on digital rights, that there is a censorship tool that was set up in place in Switzerland. So this allows to have this discussion, which we didn't have before. And then once you have it on the state level, between the state and the citizen, it also forces the state to impose this to the rest of the society. Think about the right to not, if you're protecting the right to life, a state will say, okay, we're not allowing death penalty, but then it will also make sure there is a criminal code to avoid murder, because that's a murder is not between the government and the individual, it's just between two individuals. But it's not in the interest of the society to allow murder. So the same way, the state is respecting digital integrity, so then it must put in place laws where individuals in between themselves are also respecting their own digital integrity. So I really see that the right of digital integrity, and we said it in the introduction, it can be a general justification to the right of data protection, but it's actually a bit higher. So the right to digital integrity is really about protecting the autonomy of the person, and the right to data protection is actually how we're going to really in practical going to implement that. And this is the link to the autonomy, though, to the digital self-determination that we are looking for. So what are the possible implementations? So I'm working on 2 implementations right now, and these are the ones that I point to. The first one is the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It's in the Article 3, Alinéa 1. Everyone has the right to respect for his and her physical and mental integrity. And we have a similar article in the Swiss Constitution, Article 10, Alinéa 2, where every person has the right to personal liberty, and in particular to the physical and mental integrity and to freedom of movement. So even the personal liberty and freedom of movement are rights which are linked to the autonomy and your capacity as a human person to be part of, to be a citizen who can vote in a free way. So what I'm aiming at is actually adding the digital part here. So everyone has a right to respect to his and her physical, mental, and digital integrity. We have 3 current implementations which are ongoing, and luckily in Switzerland we have a system which is a federal system, and each federal state has, each local state has its own constitutions, and there are constitutional processes there. And there's already 3 places where the work has started. The Canton of Valais is in the process of creating a new constitution. So they have a constituent assembly, which is working on renewing completely their own constitutions. And there is one committee which is specialized in the fundamental rights that has accepted the proposal and has unanimously, actually, it was approved, and it's going to be presented during to the whole assembly, and hopefully being voted in the next by the people of that state. In Geneva, they had started a local initiative. One political party had started a local initiative to actually make a referendum, or an initiative, we call it public referendum. Because of COVID, they changed their strategy. Now they're going to make a law to propose a fundamental law in Geneva. And in Neuchâtel, Canton of Neuchâtel, is the work is just starting right now in the political sphere. But these are cantons which are pretty small, so pretty open to these kind of ideas, and so we're pushing that. And every canton in each of those places, there is a constitution that has the same article that we showed you before. The right to physical and mental integrity are showing in those constitutions, so we can actually update easily the constitutions. Yeah, and that was the. I'm just going to leave it here. That was the main presentation of this theme, and I leave it to Gregory now.
Yeah, thank you, Alexis. Yeah, thank you for the. You can stop sharing now, because we also would like to give over to Alexander Savnin, who is from the technical community and will speak more about the technical aspects about this, and then we will well, in the end of the panels, we will open the floor and promote everybody to panelists, so you can be able to ask your questions in person. And so far we also have one question in the Q&A, which we'll be answering later. So thank you. Alexander.
Okay, Gregory, thank you very much. So I want to augment Alexis a bit, because the quote from Peter Sunde is from 2013. In 2013, there was a chance to be away from the keyboard. Now, with modern smartphone, smartwatches, digital assistants, and something like, you are always at the keyboard. So it's really, really difficult to get out of it. I want to remind you about a little joke. When a person who is new to internet usually asked, okay, I downloaded a file from the internet, how to upload it back? Internet put us into a state when if you uploaded something to the internet, you can't download it back. You can't remove it forever. But even with legislations of data removal or rights to be forgotten, it will not work. If something gets to the internet, it's usually stay there forever. But I wanted originally to tell you about digital integrity, well, Eastern way, like personal data is common good. Yes, in Russian Federation, our government tries to declare our personal data belongings of the state. Our personal data regulation is written a bit the same way. But in parallel, they always try to propose legislation that will allow government to sell it to corporations. Luckily for us, such legislation have not passed yet. But such combination of Eastern common good approach to personal data, to person's digital footprint, combined with Western US things when everything is a good, can lead us to really bad consequences. Another example is the modern COVID-19, when personal data of Russians are used as common good for COVID tracking or something like protecting from the movement. For example, children and a senior person who have to stay at homes use their digital footprint, have been revoked the right for free usage of public transport. So that's a part of their digital portrait have been used to restrict their rights. But I don't feel it's the major problem yet. Another problem that's the serious part of our integrity belongs not to us but to corporations. I'm old enough. I lived in pre-internet era, and when I look at my childhood data, it's just a show box with the photos and maybe some Boy Scout badges. Nothing more exists from me from that time. But nowadays we use a serious services held by corporation as a part of our digital life. For example, I think we all use some email providers. Somebody uses Gmail, somebody uses local mails. And a serious part of our life are actually linked to these digital aspects of our life. Because this interaction is interaction between us and corporation, it's usually not considered as part of rights which need to be protected by the government. But imagine if suddenly you lose access to all your emails, how difficult it would be. You will need to recreate a lot of, not just create a new mail account, you need to recreate a lot of links and relations which you set up in your digital era, accounts of shops. You need to recreate your internet governance forum account also. That would be really, really difficult. And talking in current legislation, for example, I'm not sure that Google will do it, but some other services can suspend your account instantly. Or you're publishing your photos and consider Facebook not just for communication, but as your diary. You put their photos and achievements of your children. You write your travel reports, and suddenly Facebook can revoke you this right if they decide that you do not belong or justify a false claim against you. So I think that's a regulated protection of data ownership needs to be set up in laws. Google, one of the few corporations from the times when they declared the corporation of good, allow it something like download all your data. That's reasonable, but I'm not sure that Facebook allows us to it, or Yandex or somebody else. So in addition or in discussion with Alexis, I think that's part of our digital integrity need to be not just protected versus government, but also versus those digital services which were not existing in the times of creation of Universal Declaration of Human Rights or setting up legislation as it exists now. We need some addition to governing data, not just governing distribution of our data, but big corporations, but also our right of our ownership on that data. Again, with Facebook, remember that it looks like that their service agreement declares everything that you publish on Facebook as a property of Facebook itself. It's really, really dangerous thing. And if we talk to human rights community, we always know that Twitter or Facebook likes to ban controversial account on controversial things. Okay, then back to you, Gregory.
Okay, thank you. So we had additional panelist that was preparing for the session, Jocelyn Radek, who is apparently not here, I think due to technical problems. But my colleague, Bailey Lamont, had spent a lot of time preparing the session together with her and had made notes and can take over and deliver some insights from her point of view. Bailey.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Bailey Lamont. I am a longtime activist and a pirate. I'm the chair of Pirate Parties International. And you actually were not supposed to be hearing from me so much on this topic today. As Gregory said, Jocelyn Radek was going to be our panelist. Unfortunately, last minute, she was not able to attend. It's unfortunate because Jocelyn, if you don't know who she is, she's from the US. She is a whistleblower attorney, and she has spent her entire career, she's a whistleblower herself actually, and she spent like her entire career working on supporting whistleblowers, defending whistleblowers, including Thomas Drake. Edward Snowden is also a client of hers. And so she would have given you a perspective on all of this as a lawyer, as somebody who actually deals with these issues in a legal sense every single day. So apologies, because I myself am not a lawyer. I'm an activist, like I said. So I'm coming at you with this from more of an activist perspective, but I can start with kind of touching on Jess's work and how that relates to all of this. So when we think about digital integrity, this is something that for years has been part of the discourse when talking about whistleblowers and the transparency movement and the fight for transparency and defending those who bring us the truth. You know, and sometimes that involves breaking the laws that are in place, but the information that comes forward is, I mean, I can't think of a time when it wasn't in the public interest, right? And directly related to issues of human rights. So if we look at WikiLeaks, for example, with their releases, we can look at the Afghan war diaries, the Iraq war logs, which included the collateral murder video. What was revealed with that was vast human rights abuses on the part of the US government and US military that none of us would have known about if Chelsea Manning had not sent that information to WikiLeaks and it had been released to the public. So that's, you know, one thing that comes with the digital age and with the internet is this ability to freely share information, and you know, in some cases information that we really need to know about, but we wouldn't have access to it if it wasn't just like revealed to us, outside of government, outside of the institutions, legal institutions, outside of the legal system. So, and like on like another thing on top of that with the digital age is we see grassroots social movements around the world being strengthened by this ability to freely share information and connect with people around the world, activists able to get their message out there. We can look at the Arab Spring, we can look at Occupy, we can look at Black Lives Matter today, we can look at Save Your Internet, and we see just like the capabilities that come with online organizing and having a free and open internet where people can come together and work on common causes and common goals. And the thing is, human rights and digital rights, when these things come up in conversation, I notice that they tend to get talked about as if they're separate things. And it's like we're looking for ways to connect them, but the truth of the matter is that they're already inherently connected. Like you can't, in this day and age, you simply cannot have one without the other. Like you don't have human rights, or at least full human rights, if your digital rights are not in place. And your digital rights, those are part of your basic human rights nowadays. So that's one thing is like I feel like we need to stop separating these things, and we need to start talking about them as if they are the same thing, because they are. They're inherently connected. And we live in a time where, just like the overall system that we live in, obviously, we come from different parts of the world. It might look different, a little different depending on where you're from, but I think that most of us understand that the overall system, society, the political system is becoming more and more driven by inequality. And at the same time, we see the digital world becoming more, in a lot of ways, unequal in its governance. And at the same time, social issues kind of get brought into the digital sphere. We have a small percentage of the ruling class owning most of the world's wealth and resources. And at the same time, we have tech giants like Google and Facebook, which are actually very small portions of the internet itself. That's the thing that a lot of people don't realize either, is like the social media aspect, these big tech giants, these websites that, the majority of people are using nowadays, like that's not the internet. Facebook is not the internet. The internet is a very big place. These big tech owned websites and social media giants that we use all the time, that's like tip of the iceberg when you think about the whole internet. So so that's, just like we have a small portion of the rich owning so much of the world's wealth and resources, we have these big companies, small portions of, that take up small portions of the internet, owning more and more of our personal data and trying to control more and more of our internet. And we see that play out. We see how it benefits powerful people and institutions in lots of different ways. For example, if you're on these websites, you see posts and discussions about certain topics being censored on these websites. Like you see pages of activists and activist groups being taken down. You see people getting censored if they criticize political figures or if they criticize political decisions. Information about human rights violations by, let's say, law enforcement will get censored. Domains blocked so that you can't even share links on these websites. Just, prohibiting the sharing of documents that contain information that these companies and the people behind them don't want you to have access to, sometimes at the request of law enforcement directly. And we have this issue of big tech deciding which information is legit and what isn't, right? And really, like, big tech, that encompasses a lot. It's like, who actually makes those decisions, right? It's a few people sitting at a boardroom table, right? Whereas like those of us who are trying to share information, well, that's what we're doing, right? And we're being treated as if the information we're trying to share, often in the public interest, isn't legit. And these companies just like have that control, right? While at the same time, they collect so much information about us, our names, our email addresses, our social media connections, in a lot of cases, like our home addresses and, very personal information about where we live and what we do gets collected by these companies. What websites we visit, which tells them so much about us, right, as individuals, including things that maybe we consider very personal, right, in some cases secret to us, right, but big tech knows about it. And that information is being shared all across the board. So that completely contradicts with our digital rights. It takes away our digital integrity, and it's a violation of our human rights, our right to privacy. We know that intelligence agencies and law enforcement use big tech to spy on us. If you're involved in human rights work or grassroots social movements in any way, you know that the police and the spy agencies are probably monitoring your Facebook page, your Twitter account, any online accounts that you have. They're probably, I wouldn't even say probably, like they are watching what you're doing, what you're saying, making a profile on you. And this, I mean, it contradicts so much when we look at like what our basic human rights are, our rights to assembly, our rights to protest, our rights to free speech. This results in self-censorship. And I mean, what human rights do you actually have if you can't even speak your mind because you're afraid of what might happen to you if you speak your mind? So Human Rights Watch, I have a good quote from them, just about how, on one hand, technology and the digital age can be very liberating. At the same time, it can be oppressive to us. So digital technology has transformed the means through which human rights are both exercised and violated around the globe. The internet has become an indispensable tool for the realization of a range of human rights and for accelerating economic development. Yet every day, there are new examples of how digital technologies play a role in undermining human rights, whether through a prime minister banning Twitter in Turkey, a death sentence for posting on Facebook in Iran, bulk electronic surveillance of American citizens by the NSA, a court ruling on the right to be forgotten in Google searches in Europe, or a requirement that internet users supply real names to service providers in China. This dual-edged aspect of technology was conveyed well by a Tibetan human rights activist to the Toronto-based research group Citizen Lab. Technology is this funny thing where it's a lifeline, and then maybe it's your ticket to jail. So, as much as we, I think a lot of us here, we probably agree, like we love the internet, we love technology, we think the digital age is a great thing. At the same time, we're dealing with some serious issues with that. And, political and legal systems everywhere are still trying to catch up with this new age of technology and its implications for human beings. I think Alexander already touched on this briefly, but it's like wherever you live, you probably, you have a constitution that's supposed to guarantee your basic human rights. But these constitutions, I think in most, if not all cases, were written before the digital age. So they're kind of outdated in that sense. And we're still figuring out how these rights that were supposed to be guaranteed actually translate to the digital sphere, and what needs to happen to uphold those rights. And, you know, we talk about privacy, and that's a word that gets thrown around a lot as a human right, but it often, as we see in lots of places, doesn't actually get treated as a human right. The government will, you know, and these companies like Facebook and Google and whatnot will say that they care about your privacy, but they're still collecting everything they can about you. They say they won't share your information or do anything harmful with it. And you want to believe that to like make yourself feel better about it, right? But then you see the personalized ads on Facebook that are directly related to your last Google search. So, you know, it's like they say one thing, but like, how is our privacy actually being protected? That's something else. And that's a big thing here, is that privacy actually has to mean something. It can't just be this word that gets thrown around by those who want us to believe they're taking it seriously when, you know, in a lot of cases, they're probably not. So we need to update our legal frameworks around this matter and ensure that digital rights and human rights are treated as one thing, not separate things. And, you know, in a lot of ways, our data is an extension of us, and we need to treat it like that. You know, I work in the social work field, and, you know, at a women's shelter, and we deal with data all the time, right? We have like our online program where we take our case notes, you know, we have our files on our clients, and we take their privacy and their confidentiality very seriously. Like, they're allowed to have their files destroyed at the end of their stay with us if they want to, right? But I mean, there's always that concern about, you know, the software company where, you know, that made the program, you know, where we make our case notes and stuff. And like, you know, so it's, we can take all of the precautions that we want. We can do whatever we want on our end to try and ensure like the privacy of our clients. But there's like another aspect there, that whatever we do, like, they still have their own like terms of service. They still have their own you know, policies and stuff for how they're going to deal with that data. And like, how do we know that it's actually being taken care of, right? So I live in Canada, and the Canadian government, so they've invested millions actually in digital literacy, to help people understand the digital world a little better and how to engage with it safely, how to identify the risks that, you know, kind of come with using the internet. This is an important thing, especially if you're new, right? If you're new to it. So like, if you think about like elderly folks who like didn't grow up with the internet, you know, are just starting to use it for the first time to keep in touch with their families, especially during COVID time. This is a theme, right? You know, people really need to be taught, you know, what the risks are, what, you know, how to protect your privacy the best that you can as an individual, and, you know, what to be careful of, things like that. So in Canada, we actually, the government is actually investing quite a bit in that digital literacy for that reason. The Canadian government is also working on a digital charter to protect privacy. And there's some principles here. So universal access is one. So all Canadians having equal opportunity to participate in the digital world. And that's, you know, a big part of like digital human rights, you know, the right to life. You know, we all have the right to, you know, exist and participate in the world. Well, we also need that that right protected to participate in the digital world and to have the tools that we need to have proper access and, you know, proper literacy around it and stuff. Safety and security is another thing. So being able to trust the services that you use, that they're going to keep you safe and they're not going to misuse your data and they're not going to violate you in the ways that that we see happening and that we worry about happening, right? Consent is another thing, control and consent. having control over what data you are sharing and who's using it, what are they using it for, knowing that your privacy is protected. At the same time, transparency is an important thing, and making sure that these companies are being transparent about their practices with our data, making sure that we have access to it, and that we're free to share or not share, as much as we feel is appropriate. Another thing, with everything kind of moving online as opposed to offline now, it's important that people can access the digital services that come from governments nowadays. So a lot of the services for Canadians, that's online now. So a big part of
Bailey?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So maybe finish a sentence, but that have been like 20 minutes. So I would rather, we have excellent questions from attendees, and I would rather like also spend time addressing those. So finish the sentence in case you went, and then I would like to move on a little.
Okay, well, I can actually stop right there. I was just getting to the end, actually. I was just going through the Canadian Digital Charter and the principles of that, but you guys can look that stuff up pretty easily. So I apologize for talking too much.
No, it's been on time. It had 20 minutes. That was it. It's good. It's just like a little bit concerned because we do have a lot of good questions. And
absolutely.
if you open the Q&A panel, you see the questions coming in, and Alexis and me had been busy trying answering them. But there's a lot of questions. So I would suggest that we go and promote everybody to panelist, and it will take some time probably. Some seconds, so maybe you help me.
Okay.
And
we promote everyone now.
Oh, there's a button, promote everyone. Great. Thank you. So, while we're doing that, so there had been some very good remarks, of which one stood out, like from Idil Kula, said that there had been court sentences in the past that had barred people from using computer or using digital tools. And in the light of defining digital integrity as part of the human life, sentencing somebody to stay away from the internet is kind of a sentence to digital death, which is maybe a little bit harsh, but I tried to look it up when this sentences had been actually last issued. And in the United States, like in the year 2000, there had been held by the Supreme Court, but in the year 2003, they already argumented that it is too far-fetching because like being able to already in 2003 need to be on the internet, like to find a job without internet was already unthinkable back then, but still possible probably. If we talk about today, I don't think that there are actual current sentences to sentence somebody to barring the internet, but maybe in different countries, I'm not aware. But this is what is very interesting.
Gregory, I can maybe just add a comment there. There are some cases that we have which are more privately, and think of, instead of a state, think of someone who has a profile which is very public on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and then suddenly is cut off by the social network because for some reason, it can be a good reason, can be a bad reason, and we had cases, and it's anecdotal, of course, but we saw this young lady who was having 1 million followers on Instagram, and when she was cut from her profile, she went on YouTube, made a video, and she was crying, and she said she called the police, that she had been murdered digitally, and she said that to the police, and she was crying for help, and people were making fun of her, and the police couldn't do anything. And I think maybe her reaction was a bit a bit too much. maybe, but what her reaction was something I think is natural, and we will see more and more, and we will see when it's not acceptable that people are being cut off, and if they relate to their social network as really part of their life, and being cut like this is like a murder. So yeah, that's the closest thing we have, which is more on the private side.
Yeah, that's really brings us to importance of state protecting our rights. There was a question from Evgenia Klementyeva about, do we need to revoke the human rights set or just need to upgrade it? I think neither one and neither other, because I think the only rights, new right which was appeared after moving from a print press. The print press creates something material and needs a time for creation. But nowadays we can share information much faster and make copies with little expenses. But still, for example, copyright regulations come from a print press times, and actually pirates are trying to work on changing this situation. But what do we need? We need to force our states to rework frameworks and methods of protecting rights. Because in many cases, our states prefer to take a position of ostrich with the head in the sand, ignoring the possible digital consequences or digital acts of huge corporation. Okay, we will not suspect huge corporation in bribing or something like, but as far as we remember, I don't remember who, Google was spending a lot of lobbyist money on Facebook to something like pressurize European parliamentarians to create a new legislations against them. That's already happening. So that's, in this case, United States government should pressurize their corporation and protect Europeans and the European state colleagues from their own corporations. Also in questions was mentioned and slightly mentioned by Alexis that in modern privacy regulations or personal data regulations, the state security are extensions everywhere. State security needs are extensions for GDPR. State security needs are extensions for Russian personal data regulations. And we really don't know what can happen. Even in fair Western countries like United States, the PRISM program can appear, which creates surveillance against their own citizens. So we need to increase our literacy and using this literacy to improve our control over what governments do. Somebody else?
So yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Maybe raising hands and respond or suggest something. We have around 50 people here.
We have around 50 people here, and we have still about 25 minutes left, 23 minutes left. So we have plenty of time actually to take some questions. And if not somebody raising their hand, I will just read out some of the Q&A because they are actually very good. So anyone? Okay, so in that case, I just...
We have a great discussion in a chat.
Yes.
While no one was panelist and had no ability to voice their thoughts, but now don't shy, please.
So actually, so the Angela Missen, apologies if I mispronounce it, had a couple of good remarks. The one is the collection of and sale of personal data forms the basis of the monetization model for many corporations. Would you advocate for compensations for corporations for removal or the fundamental income sources, or in order to achieve the goals of digital human rights? And Alexis answered something about that he will probably answer again. And then there was a remark that said that she hate to be so negative, but the large social media companies set their own rules. So there is a difference in jurisdiction terms between legality and accessibility. So yeah. Alexis.
Yeah. So definitely it's not about making a social network nationalizing social network. No, absolutely not. It is, I think, important that the economy, the business, and everyone who's making a business is doing this in a way which is respecting the individuals and respecting the autonomy and the free will of the person in engaging into the business relationship with them. Okay, and this is how our economy in general is made. There is in the case of those services right now, they are based on acquiring data and processing data and pushing back the data in a way to change your behavior without you noticing that you're changing your behavior and pushing you to buy something. And the impact on your autonomy is actually larger than what people expect. And if you talk to people who are on social network, most of them will say they're fine and they are still free and they decide what they want to do. In reality, we see that it's different. And Cambridge Analytica is one good example of this. So I think there is a disconnect between what people think, most people think, and the reality. And so and also now we're starting to see tools appearing that allows or models which allows to create the same services without this data part, which is an unnecessary, serving a video stream. You don't need to have a full analysis of the person to be able to serve a data stream. And before, until now, that was the only model because it's a way to monetize, but there are different ways to monetize. So I don't think, so I hope this answers the question, but just to go a bit further to some kind of analogy we can make, think of what, so it's a bit harsh analogy, but I'll still do it. Think about slavery. Slavery was what? Is like you take people to work and you take possession of people to take their workforce and to do something else. And here you take data and you use it as force to actually create revenues. And there is, for example, a model which exists and is being researched in France in a university, and I can put the link if you're interested, where people are thinking, okay, instead of, because data is part of the person, well, we can maybe see that the relationship between the data, if the data is working for a company, then maybe it's more like a labor relationship than actually a ownership relationship. And then you have other types of, and you can still pay for the price of labor but having a more respectful communication between the two.
I can also add to this question that's collecting and using personal data by internet corporation is not their main source of profits. When they a bit grew up, they started using personal data as ability to monopolize markets and get incompetent advantage to the services they don't collect in personal data. So if this will be, I don't believe that I'm saying this, but if this will be regulated out by the states, this corporation will not die anyway. So they just, well, will be search engines or catalogs as they was founded, but their extra multi-billion profits, which goes, I don't think that's for a common good, they will just decrease, but nothing disappears. And if Gregory allows and no additions, I could answer another question.
Sure. We are discussing here now that the people do not see the Q&A content because since they've been promoted to panelists, they do not see the older Q&A questions, which is strange, okay. But I'm busy copying back them to the chat. So okay. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, there is an interesting question from Winky Who. That regulation of data protection may vary from countries. Some countries may not have much awareness of this issue, and those citizens' online data may be easily leaked or shared and used by the third parties, having their right attained. How we can promote sound legal framework and implement it worldwide? First of all, the Internet Governance Forum is an excellent place for promoting ideas of such framework. So we are exactly at place. But also, as members of global community, we should promote not just digital literacy, but well knowledge of consequences of what you are doing. And maybe make more studies, because, for example, my personal postal address are only the internet since 1996, I think, when I first time registered a domain name, and databases were public at that moment. Nowadays, well, I know that it's open by I'm trying not to share additional data. I'm really carefully think where I share my data. But in general, usually all audience knows that if you put your fingers into an electric plug on the wall, that will be bad. I think additional education need to be done from the child times on which data could be spread, how you can use internet for communications. That's another way we really should promote by all us. Okay, Gregory?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Can I also, I just want to add, you were talking about literacy, and I think that's very, actually is the most important thing, the digital literacy. What I can see is that, at least in Switzerland, the education right now is on digital education. I can see with my own kids, is made first by people who were not born in this, and it's normal because adults are not always born. They don't have the digital literacy themselves, so it's a bit hard. It's something that takes time. But also, most of the digital literacy, digital education right now has a purpose of knowing how the tools that you're going to use in business, knowing to use Word and Excel and such tools. And it's not yet, it has to evolve to how to manage your tools for your life, how to manage your social networks, how to manage interaction, how to manage cryptography, because cryptography is going to be important in terms of signing, proving, and engaging yourself in doing contracts. So all these elements of how do you live a digital life are not taught at school right now, rather than just a purely material approach. And that's, I think, what's going to be critical, and it's why it's going to take time. Of course, these changes are going to take time.
Okay, so Idil Kula had a question to you, Alexis. Kula, go ahead, please. Oh, Idil, sorry.
Am I audible? Thank you so much. I am Jampini, and I have a question. And you mentioned that when it comes to data regulations in Europe, France has some adoptions in terms of property law regulations, and they are adopting property law regulations to data regulations. But there are, I have read that there are so many criticism about property law adaptations to the data regulations, because when you try to adapt property law into data regulations, there can be a way to data localization, because this time, once you try to adapt with property laws, it can be a way for a nationalization of the data, and actually it's another downfall and backlash for the data regulations, because when data localization is activated, it is a bad side for and a bad impact for science development and investments, and any other kinds of scientific initiatives. And I actually wonder what you are really think about when it comes to what laws should be adapt to the data regulations. End of the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Idil. There are many aspects on there, and it was also like someone else, the question of Umaira, it was also on there, linked to that. There is several things. First, the issue about using property law for personal data. So I think that I view it as a bad idea. Some people, they see it as a way to define a value on data so that people can realize that suddenly personal data has value. But I think this is more like going into the approach of value as a commodity. And if you give a value and you put property rights, then you can sell it. And if you sell yourself to someone else, usually it always ends bad. So I wouldn't go into that direction. The second thing you say is about a phenomenon which we see is balkanization of the internet. And that happens in different aspects, and it's not only personal data, and personal data will push further, sadly, on this, but we saw it already with moral concept. And I shared with someone, and actually, I shared a very old jurisprudence of law in the year 2000. I think the Yahoo jurisprudence, where between France and the US, there was already a clash because everything objects which were Nazi related in France were forbidden, and in the US they were accepted. You can buy and sell them because it was free speech. And then suddenly it's for French people, those objects are available on the internet, and internet has no border. So here we see a clash of jurisdiction, and we saw this between Middle East and Europe and China and the US. I mean, all these moral clashes of jurisdiction, and then with the approach on personal data that I described, the big sets, we will see this balkanization of the internet growing further. I think so, and I think the approach of like protecting the personal data the way I hope it's going to happen, and with very with limiting personal data. What we will see happening, and we already see this happening, is that you will have states organizing data collection of other states. So like trying to understand how the whole individuals, the whole society of other states is happening. I mean, the NSA in the US is trying to listen to everyone. We just discovered that the US were asking Denmark to spy on the social networks in Holland, and they were hoarding data. Okay, so all of this will indeed lead to reducing the digital footprint of individual with such approach, and hopefully if we do this, we don't have to do enough balkanization. But yeah, it's a real debate, and it's not solved, and I see fragmentation moving on.
And if possible, yeah, I would like to ask your question, which you wrote in Q&A. Even you directed it to Bailey. So you asked that civil society and other entities like academia and NGOs work for some decentralized internet and equally share digital materials and data will be successful. First of all, it is successful because, as we know from multi-stakeholder approach, which was actually not legalized or set up by United States, but just written as observation. So current internet is actually approach from academia, technical community, civil societies, and NGOs. And as Alexis started, we shifted from a print press society. So even in academia, you know, that's old style print pressing publishers are trying to hide scientific researches behind the copyright walls. Actually, the situation is changed, that academia is fighting towards these parts, and as far as I remember, they are very successful, actually. So the same thing that's or you doubt that or efforts against big tech is an illusion. No, it is not. Actually, if you are not doing efforts, keeping in mind not cooperating during these forums, they will be illusion. But as we see after pressurizing on Facebook, in very famous Cambridge Analytica thing, they start working because they are not just banned Cambridge Analytica. There was a company set up by Russian teenagers who was harvesting data from social network, including Facebook, also, and while selling to Russian government. But Facebook started measures which they expelled us from their social network also. So we have to do something, otherwise it will be illusion. We should not be shy on going against big tech and governments in legal and peaceful way.
I just want quickly. Sorry, Nebosha. Indeed, I use the word balkanization instead of. I use both. I also use fragmentation. I'm sorry, but it is indeed a word that has been used from the beginning and since long time, and we're trying to go away from this. But so thank you for pointing this out, that we should go away from using this word, which has a very strong meaning. And when I was a kid, I lived the Balkan situation very close to my heart. So thank you for reminding this.
Okay, thank you. So Idi Kula, short last one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers, Alexander and Alexis. And I want to add another different and actually weird example of a new application called UPD. Actually, that application allows to the end users to sell their individual data to the social media companies and the other big tech entities. And actually, this application called UBBI actually runs only in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. And I think that this kind of applications can be often seen in the future. But there is also an open door for the clashes between and against the national law regulations, because some of the national law regulations will be allowed to sell the individual data, but some countries cannot allow persons to sell or rent their individual data. But it is a really complicated issue, as we all see from the start. And thank you for Alexis to encourage us about not being so shy to the government and the other strong entities. And actually, as I am a resident of Turkey, we have so many cases of censorships, and actually, I am actually afraid of any kind of targeting, and we don't have very much space for the free speech. But I hope that sometime in the future, my people or people in the Middle East and Africa, or the southern part of the world can achieve some achievements for their human rights, etc., etc. Thank you so much for sounding me and making this for me.
Thank you. We're like 2 minutes to the end. So Alexis, do you want to answer that, or is it?
Yeah, very quickly.
Because I have also 2 things to say. So we will probably go a little bit in overtime, but very short.
2 things. First, about I don't like the South-North distinction, but definitely there is a gap between countries which have power in the technical industrial side and countries which don't. And I think if the countries which are weaker, let's say, in that sense, they have control on their personal data. They have a population that has control on its personal data. There is so much power in your own personal data, which is now taken away by Facebook, Google, and some other institution, that if you make sure that this stays with close to the people, you get the most value locally. I think that's one thing. And the other thing is about those companies allowing you to sell data. I think this is a very hard debate. For sure it will happen. What I don't want to see happen is that those companies are selling this to another third company which you don't know. That should not be allowed. I mean, because usually this is where you lose control. And then are you allowed to sell data to one specific company for a specific service? I think this is a moral, an equilibrium, a balance that is going to be found in each society. Will have different views, you know. Within France and Switzerland already, we have like different views on some specific laws, and something is allowed in one country and not, and it will be the same there. Maybe in some cases we allowed this number of data to be sold, and in another place less.
Okay, thank you, Alexis. So I think we're at the end of our allotted time, and there's two things that I need to say. The one is the call for volunteering commitments, which should be mentioned at the end of every session, and the panelists been asked to, and you are all panelists now, so lucky me, to express a voluntary commitment for the next IGF session, IGF yearly period, and you can do that by filling out this form, which I just posted to the chat, and because we don't have time to talk about it, and that would be great if you could volunteer in your personal capacity or or on behalf of your organization. And the second thing is I would kindly ask you to actually take the time and fill in the evaluation, because it was the first time we had presented here at IGF. Well, not Alexander, but we have the first time that we have organized this session, and we would like to come back and continue doing that. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope having Alexis and Switzerland as example, we all try to create something like this or propose something like this in our countries. And thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, it was fun. And then there's a question next time to make it a hybrid session. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but we will think about it, definitely. So Idil, would you care to say what it does mean? What it mean by hybrid session?
Actually, hybrid sessions or hybrid education can be also face-to-face and online through the internet. And actually, I have no mobility for travel around the world because I have some family responsibilities. And I would be so happy if in the future IGF would be adopt any kind of hybrid models. That's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Bye.
So thank you very much for coming. And
bye, everyone. Thank you for being here.
So Bailey, Alexis, and Alexander, we need to fill in the report, like in now, because.
Okay, let's do that immediately.
Yeah. Should we switch room? Probably yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I post you a link on the Signal. Okay. Bye.